Hi, this is Estelle Erasmus, your host for Freelance Writing Direct. In this short, soundbite-filled podcast, I'll cover everything the freelance and creative writer and author needs to do to move forward with their writing, their creativity, and their career. Through conversations with guests, we'll cover tips, tricks, and actionable strategies. So join me every week and grow your business and build your craft with Freelance Writing Direct. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes and Spotify. Hi, everybody. It's Estelle Erasmus, and I'm so thrilled to announce that my book, Writing That Gets Noticed, Find Your Voice, Become a Better Storyteller, Get Published, is out and available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, IndieBound, and wherever books are sold. So I would love it if you'd pick up a copy, and I think you'll learn a lot. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Freelance Writing Direct, and I'm your host, Estelle Erasmus, and I am so excited to have Kathleen Schmidt with us today. She is a book publishing expert. She has such a wide background in the industry, in the book publishing side, and She's worked with Jodi Picoult, Evander Holyfield, Michael Cohen, Marlo Thomas, and she's made sure that her clients are part of the public conversation. And we're going to talk a lot about that. And she has been a veteran in all these different companies, from Penguin Dutton, Gotham Books, Simon & Schuster, Perseus Book Groups, and Skyhorse Publishing. And now she's involved in a wide variety of projects at KMSPR, her public relations marketing consulting firm, where she works with independent publishers such as Polished Stone Press and all sorts of organizations. And we connected through the Women's Media Group committee where we're involved. She has a Substack newsletter that I recommend everyone sign up for. It's called Publishing Confidential, and inside she shares her wealth of inside knowledge that she hopes will demystify the book industry, much as I try to demystify the online and magazine publishing industry. So I am so happy that she's here today. We have so much to talk about, Kathleen.
Thank you so much for having me, Estelle.
Oh, my goodness, it's my pleasure. Okay, let's get right into it.
Okay.
Substack is just so popular right now because you are telling it like it is about publishing and what's going on in book publishing. So first of all, can you tell me, I have an idea, but what is the most popular coverage that you've covered so far?
There's two. One of them was Publishing is Broken. And the other one was book publicity, what works and what doesn't. Those have been my two best performing Substacks and have spawned all kinds of conversations.
Okay, so tell me, in terms of the Publishing is Broken,
Mm-hmm.
can you break it down a little bit more? Is it because there used to be really solid gatekeepers and that might be changing? It might not. I mean, I've seen people come into publishing from all different places.
I think there's a lot of different aspects that make publishing a little weaker than it has been in the past. My gist of that Substack was that publishers cannot continue doing things the way that they've always been done because it's simply not working. Book sales in August and July were down considerably. During the pandemic, publishing saw a boon because everybody was home. Nobody had anything else to do. So they were ordering books. And now I think we're in a stage where people want an experience. They want to go out. They want things to do. They don't want to sit home and read. And we're in an economy where people are being more judicious with their dollars. So as that relates to, say, a TikTok star, people are spending a lot of time on TikTok. I'm one of those people. When you see this TikTok star and then you see a book by them, it's an extension of their brand. Now, the trick with that, though, and publishing saw a lot of this with Instagram and some of it with Twitter, is does that following translate into sales? Because you can scroll through TikTok for free. And it's a whole different story spending $25 to $30 on a book. And that's really part of what the problem is. I in that Substack, I brought it back to other industries. So if you look at, say, the streaming industry, part of the problem with that is TikTok too, because I can scroll on TikTok and watch tons of scenes from movies or TV shows, and I don't need a streaming service to do that. I don't need to pay for it. So the model that is in place right now, it is in trouble.
To go on that point, a thought crossed my mind because I recently became obsessed with Suits, and I realized that it was because a viral TikTok video started by showing the beginning episode when Mike came to Harvey and that's what got me hooked. I didn't even realize it. I'm like, why was I watching Suits? And now I know. So that is over, I think, 8 billion views. It's the most popular streaming now of ever. Yep. And that started with TikTok. So there's Book Talk.
Yep.
And I know you've talked about this. And there's also people who who started working in the offices of publishers because they were on TikTok recommending books.
That I don't know too much about. I do know that Penguin Random House, and this was an article, I believe, in Fortune or Forbes, one of the two. They hired maybe 3 or 4 Book Talk influencers to come in and help them with their TikTok presence. And to me, that's kind of like, why can't you just have somebody in-house do that? It's also problematic because I feel like Book Talk is not the answer to what ails publishing. If TikTok went away tomorrow, publishing needs a plan B. And I feel like they're banking too much on TikTok making books sell, where really what it is TikTok and Book Talk cater to backlist titles mostly. And I was just reading this morning that in August, 72% of print book sales were backlist titles. That says a lot. And to your point about Suits, Suits to me is like a backlist title.
Right. That's such a great point, Kathleen. And it's interesting. When I selected my publisher, I was very well aware that New World Library has a huge backlist, and they work their backlist model. And I think that it's really so key what you're saying in terms of demystifying, because people think they have to go traditional, and sometimes that's not always the way to go. Like, people can go to a writing conference and meet an agent that way. They don't have to cold query 100 agents, right? I mean,
sometimes. I mean, I was a literary agent for 3 years, and I did not go to conferences, and I did get all my queries were cold queries. I think it's hard either way because agents are overwhelmed with submissions. And so what you're writing really has to stand out. But the other thing, and I've experienced this with a couple of people I've consulted with lately who are working on proposals, is that they can't whittle down what they're writing about in 2 sentences. And if you can't do that, then you can't possibly pitch your book because it's all over the place. You have to know what you're writing, and you have to know who you're writing it for.
Right.
And sometimes people think that explaining their book as covering many, many topics will appeal to many, many different people. And that's not true. You need to really be laser focused on who your audience is and what exactly your book is saying.
And also for the proposal, I think you really need to show who it's a marketing tool, isn't it? A
Mhm.
proposal for a nonfiction book, it's a marketing tool because you're not just showing the premise of your book, you have to
Right.
show why you are the one to write it. So you
Mhm.
have to, for nonfiction, you have to have a platform. It's really hard, I believe, if you don't have a platform to sell a nonfiction book. I'm not talking about a memoir, that's a whole
Right.
different animal, but I'm talking about a nonfiction book focused on a topic. And
Right.
so the part of the proposal that I think has changed from, I started in publishing 3 decades ago in magazines, right? The thing that has changed in proposals is that whole section where who is your reader, who is going to
Mhm.
buy it, and really drilling down what are the organizations you're part of, who are these people. Can you talk a little bit about that from the publishing and the PR perspective as well?
Yeah, I mean, you have to be able to say, this is why I'm the person to write this book. So if you're a branding expert, or you've done marketing and PR work, and you have a platform and that's what your brand is, you can come to an agent or a publisher and say, well, this is my platform, this is what I talk about, this is what I'm known for, and now I want to expand by writing a book. That makes perfect sense. If you're coming at it from a place of you're not known for talking about that specific topic and you're just pulling it out of the blue, that's much harder. And and platform covers a lot of different things. So it could be social media platform, it could be a Substack, it could be that you've gotten a lot of bylines, writing pieces that lead back to the topic you're writing about. You need to position yourself as an expert in what you're writing about, and be able to explain in few words why are you the expert, what's the proof. It's sort of like a thesis. This is why I'm good at this, this is why I've been successful, here's proof of
Right.
it. And that signals to a publisher or an agent that you're going to be a good partner in selling copies of the book.
I love that. So back to your the Substack newsletters that really went almost not viral, but the one that you said about the publishing is broken. And what was
Yep.
the other one that you said?
The other one was book publicity, what works and what doesn't.
Okay, let's talk about that. Because my book came out in June and I did not do the traditional go to a bookstore and do a
Mhm.
signing with it because it's a writing book and I just wanted to kind of celebrate. And I didn't know, like, I have been to a lot of people's book signings or book signings and not a lot of people came, or it's just kind of, it's just a regular thing. And I just thought I just wanted to have a party. But that same day I had a virtual conference with the American Society of Journalists and Authors, which I've been a member of since 1997. I ran a panel, and so I had my book cover in the background and people were calling out my book, so that made it kind of special. Plus I had an article that came out that day. I had a lot of things that were tangential. So what do you recommend today? And I know you said that you're not always in favor of these go to a bookstore and do a book
No.
signing. So yeah, let's talk about that because I love that, because I read an article about it and I would love to hear what you say. Yeah.
Okay. Well, first I'll say I'll put this on myself. So if I were to write a book right now, and it is something I want to do, and I have an idea of what I'm going to do, would I want to go do an event at a bookstore? Maybe. And the only reason I would do that is I would make it into sort of a gathering of family and friends to come out and celebrate the publication of my book. So that's one thing. It's another thing entirely when you're an author and you want to go out on a book tour, you have to consider that it's not just going to a book signing, it's finding a babysitter, it's maybe going out to dinner, it's getting gas, it's then spending money to buy a book. You're asking for a big financial commitment from people. And a lot of people just aren't willing to spend that money on a book signing right now. And I've seen it way too much that authors go out and spend, and a lot of, I mean, the side note here is a lot of publishers are pulling back on paying for book tours. So a lot of book tours for authors are self-funded. And I would say spend the money on something else. It does not make sense to spend a lot of money to go to a bookstore and sell 10 copies.
Right.
You could just buy them yourself for the money for a lot less money than you spend traveling there. So you have to ask yourself, why is it that you think a book tour or book signings will benefit you? Really, like, be honest with yourself. Take the ego out of it. If you think that you're going to go out there and pack a house full of people, you're wrong. Because unless you're Jodi Picoult or someone of that nature, where she at this point has 850 people show up and she does them off site, it's not going to happen because people aren't interested in sitting there listening.
I love that.
I mean, that's as honest as I can get.
No, the honesty is fantastic and so needed, because this is not your grandmother's or even your mother's publishing atmosphere. It is not. And that's something that I'm passionate about sharing with my viewers and listeners and readers. And so for me, my first book signing ended up being at the Writer's Digest conference after I led 2 sessions. And then I had people buying the books and I signed it. So that was fun. And I also signed it at my party because it was a party for when my book launched. What other things do you recommend that people do to maximize their book launch time or prepare for it even?
I think, first of all, that there should not be such pressure that authors put on themselves about a book launch, because they will undoubtedly become disappointed. There's this idea, and I think it's a romanticized version of what a book launch should be, where all this stuff happens the week that your book goes on sale. And 10 years ago, yeah, that was true. Even 15 years ago, it's not that way now, because the fanfare just isn't the same. So I think being realistic is great. I think for the week of on sale, do something nice for yourself. Go out to dinner with your family or something like that. Don't put so much stress on, like, I have to do X, Y, and Z. No, you don't. What you should do is, to prepare for it, is get in touch with anyone who can help you spread the word about your book using their platform. Call in favors, ask people to post about it on Instagram, or if somebody has a Substack, ask them if they would mind mentioning it in their Substack. There are different ways to use people around you, and for yourself. I think, especially debut fiction writers and debut nonfiction writers where it's more like a memoir, you have to understand that people aren't going to automatically just come to your book. It's a lot of work, and reviews are sparse. I like podcasts, I like Substacks, I like all those things. But the biggest thing I think that writers need to know is that you need to be building your audience a year out or more before your book gets published. Because if you're coming to someone like me 6 months, 3 months before your book comes out, and you say, I want to start a Substack, I want to do this, I'm going to tell you that that's great, but you should have done it a year ago. And I know writers, they want to write. They don't want to think about the other parts of this. But you have to kind of split your brain in two and think about, okay, I am writing this book, but I'm also going to have to sell it and promote it, and think about why you're doing it, and who the audience is, and what you can provide to them on other platforms that will lead them back to your book.
That's great. And what are the things, I mean, there were things I came up, I was in publishing, and then I went out of the field, then I went to medical education, then I came up through blogging and listened to your mother, and then I went back into publishing. So they used to have blog tours, and that was a way to get the book out. And I know that that's one of the things that you say. And I actually turned down several opportunities to pay. I was like, yeah, no, I don't think so. I need to do that. But for blog tours, how has that changed? Is it because there are so many podcasts and opportunities, or and podcast is really, let's face it, it's kind of like radio.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the big things that changed with blogs is social media. I think that when people see Twitter or Instagram and especially TikTok, it's just so different now, because you can get whatever you need from TikTok and a post on Instagram, and you don't necessarily need a blog tour to do that. And to be honest, and I'm not knocking book bloggers, I think that they do great work, but I also think that a lot of publishers will say, oh, look at all the book blogs we booked for you, as a way to appease authors instead of it being an effective sales tool. My thing about my Substack is being honest. So that's me being honest and me telling it like it is. I always feel like a little bit bad saying those things out loud, but it's also 100% true. And this is really how it is. I feel like it's important for people to know that if someone comes to you and says, oh, we're doing this blog tour, we have like 20 different blogs. Okay, fine. But is that really what's going to sell your book? Because what happens, and the reason I brought this up was because what happens is that you can go try to sell your next book, and you can have a list of all these things that a publisher did for you. But the problem is that there weren't sales. And you're only as good as your sales track record. And that is 100% true. It's unfortunate, but it's how the business works.
And wouldn't it be better to do a Substack tour? I mean, I'm just thinking out loud.
100%, 110%. If something like that came into existence, which I think it will, I don't think it's out of the question that something like that will happen. But I think that people just really have to be aware of a long list of things versus what's actually going to sell a book.
So I have to segue to another subject that you've talked at length about, and that's blurbs.
Okay.
And I have my own opinion, and I will just say what you say, that you don't feel for the non-writer that blurbs really sell books. And I want to say that I think if it's a niche topic, it does maybe sell books. I think it helps. Like my book, I have Noah Michelson, who's the editorial director of HuffPost Personal, which has 65 million readers, and he wrote the cover blurb for my book. But I think if it's somebody that people don't really know or something like that, and I think people do get a little stressed about the blurb situation, but you're feeling that maybe this is not the best place, and I'm going to let you say it in your words, for people to put their energy. So go.
Okay. I don't feel like it's the best place. Besides my Substack, there have been 2 recent articles about this. And the problem is when we discuss blurbs, it's often in a very insular way. So we're talking about blurbs as publishing people, right? And it just doesn't translate to the consumer. So you have to figure out what is the thing that it's going to send the consumer to buy the book. And blurbs aren't it, because if you're in a bookstore, and this is the average consumer, and you and I are not the average consumer. People who work in the business are not the average consumer, and fight me on this all the time. And I tell them, you're not the average consumer. It's just kind of like, well, so what happens next? And so what should you do? Well, this is what you should do. you have to look at the people looking at books, browsing around. What draws them in first is a cover. What translates into them buying a book is a jacket copy. 80% of book sales happen on Amazon. Do you really think that a person looking at a book on Amazon is looking at the blurbs? No, they just want to scroll to the buy button. And the other part of it is the blurbing process is just can be very disingenuous. And I mean, I've been around long enough to know that a lot of writers don't even write their own blurb. Sometimes it's to the publisher, just write it for me and I'll approve it. So a lot of times you're picking up a book, if you're looking at the blurbs, you don't even know if that person actually read the book. There's a lot of discussion about this, and I will die on the hill that blurbs don't translate into sales.
Do you think it's going to change in publishing?
Yes and no. Here's where it could be very helpful. This is a good differentiation. You have to think about what you're asking of the person you want to blurb from. So I would say that if you have a list of people, look at what kind of platform they have. And if they have a big platform, the ask should really be more about how they can help you promote your book on their platform. And that might not be them giving you a blurb. You have to think about what you're asking for. And if you can only get one thing from that person, what is it that you want? And is a blurb really the thing that you want? Because is that name recognition going to do anything for you? I will tell you, I'm reading one book right now, and I finished another book recently, and I looked at the blurbs on this second book I'm reading. I did not know one author who gave a blurb, and I didn't buy it because of the blurb. I bought it because I read something about it somewhere. I don't even remember where, and it sounded good. So that's the other part of it. And I don't want to downplay the intelligence of consumers, but you're overestimating what consumers know about authors.
I hear what you're saying, and I do think it's going to be a while before that does change. I still think it's entrenched, but there's something else that you had talked about, and it actually created a bit of a consternation in a Facebook group that I belong to. You talked about the practice of authors like just dropping casually into a bookstore and saying, "Hey, I'm an author. Do you have my book? I'd love to sign a few copies." Mm-hmm. And you said that you don't think that it's a useful thing to do. It's not helpful for the bookstores. And some people said, "Oh, I work in a bookstore and we do like when authors come in." And somebody said, "I got a great response when I went to this one and that one." So I'm wondering why you said that. And I don't disagree, but I want to hear more from you about that.
It's not, first, I would want to say that it's not an opinion that I said that. It's a fact. I have worked with authors recently and over the past 2 years or so who wanted to go do drop-in signings. And the problem is that the bookstores either had one copy, didn't have any copies, maybe had 2 copies. And you don't want to waste your time going into a store that doesn't even stock your book. And it puts everybody in an awkward position because you're going into a store. If you don't tell your publisher that that's what you're going to do, you're in for an unpleasant surprise sometimes, because your publisher can tell you these are the stores that have the most copies of the book, and you can go in and sign a few. The other part of it is that signed copies can't really be returned to the publisher. And so some stores are like, "No, that's we'd rather you not." Any author who wants to do drop-in signings should communicate that with their publisher, with their publicist. Have the publicist ask the sales department or marketing where you should go and follow their instructions. Because if you don't, it's not going to be great, and you're going to get disappointed. And I understand there's nothing wrong with going into an independent bookstore and introducing yourself. That's fine. I'm not saying don't do that. What I am saying is be strategic and think about what you're doing, because if you do it just on the fly, it's not a great, it could be a very disappointing experience.
Is there something that authors do that is just a total waste of their time and their money that you can say today, like, hey guys, don't do it?
Oh boy. I would say I shy away from taking clients on who just want book reviews, because I feel like spending the money to hire someone just to try and get you book reviews is not a good use of your money. First of all, they're really hard to get. There's not a lot of book review space left. And if you have a publicist in-house, that's what they're doing anyway. There's not some magic trick to getting reviews. There's a lot of nuances around it. So I would say if you have money, if you have a little bit of money, use it for marketing purposes. Don't, and I'm probably shooting myself in the foot here saying that, but don't go out and think I'm going to put together some money that is from my not great publishing advance to hire somebody just to try to get reviews for me, because nobody can guarantee that. The only media that's guaranteed is paid media.
Gotcha. So the reviews, there are companies that say, oh, you pay us a bunch of money and we'll go out and get you reviews.
A lot of people will do that. You know, a lot of people who do what I do will, and they're good at it, but they're also super expensive. So if you don't have that kind of money, I wouldn't, here's the thing also, I would not go to a publicist a month after your book comes out and if they say, yeah, I will try to get your book reviewed, they're taking your money, because that's not going to happen. I've seen it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're talking about with like Publishers Weekly or Midwest Book Reviews or Library Journal or
Any of that, anything,
those
or the New
industry
York Times or the Wall Street Journal.
like my publisher had submitted to Publishers Weekly. We got to buy this book review from Publishers Weekly, and Midwest Book Review gave us a good review. But that's early. That's not something that's going to
Yeah.
happen 3 months later or a month later even. So
No.
you're saying that there are some deceitful practices out there. Kathleen, this has been so helpful. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you want to say before we go into the next part of what I want to talk to you about?
No, I think I said everything.
This is awesome. I'm doing a little thing that I want to know what you're reading, what you're listening to, and maybe what you're buying.
Okay. I just finished reading The Guest by Emma Cline, which was fantastic.
She wrote The Girls, right? Or Girls?
Yeah, yes, The Girls. I couldn't put it down. It had all the elements that I like in a book, which is complicated woman living in a morally gray area, just trying to survive. And it's also a testament to what I've always known is that if you look a certain way, act a certain way, and speak a certain way, you can infiltrate the very wealthy and they won't even question you. And we've seen that with scammers, with someone like Anna Delvey or some other people that have come up in media stories. So it was a fascinating read. It was great. When I'm listening to, my favorite podcast is the Pivot podcast with Kara Swisher and Scott Galloway. Kara has been covering tech and business for years. Scott Galloway is a marketing professor at NYU, but also has run several different companies. And they're so smart. And they break down so much of what's going on in tech and business and even some politics. I think that people should really listen to it because it will give you a 360 view of what's going on in a lot of different business sectors. And it always affects book publishing, no matter what. And then what I'm buying, It's more like what I'm not buying. I love RMS beauty products. I just recently got into them, and I am not monogamous with beauty products, but this line is excellent for women of a certain age because the way that they've formulated the concealer and their eyeshadows and stuff, it doesn't get like, it doesn't cake up in your creases or anything. It's really great. And then the other the other thing that I just bought that my husband is kind of like, what are you doing? I ordered a tin or two of Blackbird donuts, which are supposed to be really good, and they get shipped. So that's my late at night. I'm scrolling through Instagram. I see an ad and I click on it, and then I'm like, I'm kind of hungry. That looks really good. So those are my things right now.
That's so cool. I love, as a former beauty editor, because that's how I got my start in beauty at Woman's World, I love hearing about new. I've actually used Paula's Choice lately. That's actually now in Sephora. It wasn't before, and it's so great to hear about these new products, especially for mature skin.
Yes. Yeah. No, I took my 15-year-old daughter shopping, and we went into Blue Mercury, and a woman was there and said, "Oh, do you want to try this?" And I was like, "Okay." So she ended up doing my whole face, and it was so good. They make this serum. It's tinted, and it's like amazing, and it has 50 SPF in it. So everything on my face right now is from that brand.
That's so awesome. I feel you. I have a 14-year-old daughter, so I feel all of that, the shopping, the whole thing. So Kathleen, where can people find you? I mean, your Substack, which is Publishing
Yes.
Confidential, and I'm going to give the links to that. And where else?
If anyone is interested in talking to me about my services, I can be reached at Kathleen at kmspr.com.
Beautiful. I want to thank you so much. This has been wonderful. And
Thank you.
Section that we're going to talk about is for my subscribers of my Substack newsletter, Writing That Gets Noticed, EstelleSerasmus.substack.com. And we'll put your link in for yours. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Follow me at EstelleSerasmus.com on my website and on social media, which is Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter at Estelle S. Erasmus. And we're now on YouTube for Freelance Writing Direct. Follow along, and soon everyone will be reading what you're writing.